Welcome to the Champions Corner, where sales training meets the mindset of a champion. I'm Mark Kelly McLean, former Canadian champion, world bronze medalist, and your coach in the world of sales. I took the discipline, focus, and resilience from boxing and brought it into business. Here, we turn sales pros into sales champions with real tactics and winning mindsets. So lace up, keep your guard up, and let's get to work. You're in the Champions Corner. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Champions Corner. This is Mark Kelly McLean, former Canadian champion, world bronze medalist. And today, we're in the ring with Steve Gallant. You know, I've known Steve since I've been 16 years old. I met Steve in Moncton, New Brunswick years ago, and we were in a boxing competition, and I was fighting his brother. And so Steve and I became fast friends, and you know, he has about 10 fights, and he went on to have a very successful career as a business person and entrepreneur. So Steve is with us. He's going to share some of his experiences that he had growing up that kind of built the foundation of who he is and why he's become what he has. You know, in the city of Moncton, he's very well known as one of the strongest entrepreneurs in the city. And I think he does attribute many of the successes that he has from that foundation that he gained through boxing. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and he can kind of give you a brief update of, you know, what he's doing, you know, what his background consists of, and how boxing helped him with his career. Steve, I'm just going to turn it over to you and just kind of give us a brief introduction of who you are and what your foundation was.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me part of your podcast. This is my first podcast, so I'll probably not do so well, but I'll give it a go. As Mark pointed out, we met each other in the boxing circles when we were teenagers, and so since then we've been best of friends. And here we are growing older together and experiencing and witnessing and seeing each other's life moments, I guess. I'm from Moncton, but I was born in Montreal, moved to Halifax for 4 or 5 years, then moved to Moncton, where I've been ever since. And like a lot of kids who go into boxing, tend to come from not the most easiest family situations. My situation was such that my parents divorced early. I was about 10 years old. And I also grew up with 2 brothers around my age. So needless to say, we were rambunctious, you know, trying to lead a straight life, but often finding ourselves in trouble situations, as many teenagers find themselves. So I think that's what led me to the boxing game. I was always a pretty tough kid, I guess. My father was kind of a tough guy, so genetically, I think I was given the tools, I guess, to be a strong kid and active kid. Yeah, so I went into boxing, and it was a discipline that, again, that a lot of children and kids, young kids that found themselves in boxing were from backgrounds that were difficult. So in that situation, you immediately learn a lot about discipline, a lot about commitment and perseverance, I guess. So it took some time before I actually had an amateur fight, and just my coach, that was his style at the time. He took his students, I guess, and made sure that they were ready. And so that included a lot of training in the early part of getting into the sport. Yeah, so boxing around here, we didn't have a lot of fighters, so it didn't take long before you were into some pretty competitive tournaments and going up the ranks rather quickly due to the lack of competition. Like most kids, they tend to go into hockey and football and baseball, so boxing was kind of a sport that kids didn't tend to gravitate towards nearly as much, of course. So I think that for me, boxing, I learned about not only the competitive part of it, but more about the discipline, about the going to the gym 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week. And, you know, if you missed, you know, the coach, he wasn't happy, and you could tell that when you walked into the gym, just the way you were treated. So you tended to show up, you know, on the next training day. That's how I grew, I guess, when it came to challenges and my discipline. And then with that, I think that translated into my business success. So I'm 61 today and been in business since I've been basically about 18 years old, and really have never worked for anyone. So again, I think my foundation of my business career, some of that, of course, is tied to my boxing in the earlier days.
So, Steve, in those formative years, in your young years when you were boxing, what do you think maybe the top three things were that allowed you to be as successful as you are? What did you take from boxing? What were the top three things you think?
Again, I think it probably would have to go back to the notion of it was a scheduled sort of training type activity. So, you had to show up your 3 to 4 evenings a week. So that took discipline and took a lot of commitment because it wasn't easy. I mean, there were days when you went to the gym, you didn't want to be in the gym. And, you might have had the night before might have been a little bit rough, even as a teenager. So to show up and maybe get some road work in and that sort of thing, it wasn't always easy. So, and then of course there were tough guys in the gym. So I mean, particularly in the earlier days of my training, sometimes you would be faced with these tougher opponents, and so it was a little bit frightening, I guess, to get in the ring with someone who was much better than you, and you knew that you were going to get smacked in the head and the body. And that's the sport of it. And, there were a lot of kids when they went to the gym, they wouldn't last. They would quit. And I stuck it out. And in business, it's the same sort of principle. I mean, you need to stick it out in times of challenging situations and tough circumstances. And if you quit, well, then, you basically take a step back or two. And also by sort of pushing through those challenging type moments in boxing and in life, and in my case in business, it sort of provides a stronger foundation and pillar, I guess. When you go on to the next deal, you'll have that much more sort of strength and confidence to be able to see to the end.
So, Steve, when you look at your career, post boxing and, getting into business and the sales factor and what sales had to do in regards to launching your businesses, were you heavily involved in the sales aspect as well? Or did you have people on the sales team? Did you hire people that were effective salespeople, or did you do it yourself?
No, I did it myself in the earlier beginnings of being in business for myself. I jumped into the real estate game very, very early, around 20 years old. So, I mean, I had, several multi-unit type smaller buildings, duplexes, triplexes, 4 units, and so on. And so I always showed my units to my potential clients and renters, I guess. You have to really put a sales hat on when you do that, because it's like anything. You're trying to sell your apartment. So for me, that's where the sales part comes in. And to this day, I continue being the principal person showing any and all my rentals. Now, albeit today they're more commercial, but there's really not a difference. I think it's important when I show, my units, I don't try to hide, the cons to a space versus the pro parts of it. So there's pros and cons to like any space. So I try to showcase both situations, and then hopefully with a positive outcome.
So, Steve, looking again at your career and looking at boxing and sales, I know that you've built an empire basically here in Moncton. And in saying that, you've hired a lot of people, and often many of them have sales roles. So, when you look at the interview process, when you're dealing with somebody and trying to hire someone in a sales role, what are some of the key things you're looking for? And are they fundamentally connected to your boxing past? Looking at the characteristics of this person, is sales related to boxing in any particular way? Did you find there was a connection between the two? And what are you exactly looking for in salespeople when you're interviewing?
Well, I mean, I've hired a lot of people, mostly in the hospitality industry, I guess, not so much in the real estate industry. I tend to, again, to do all of my sales orientated type engagements with my clients myself. But in terms of my other businesses, wherein there's a lot of people on the floor, servers and managers, those people there, I mean, they should have, and most of them do have kind of a well-balanced sales approach to dealing with our clients. And I tend to think that authenticity in people showcases itself, how it showcases itself is very important. And people see through fake and phoniness when it comes to someone trying to sell something to someone, whether it be a service or a product or anything really. So I think that the authenticity itself is critical when it comes to successful selling. Again, when I hire people within our businesses, I look for people that I just feel they're real and they're authentic, and they don't always have to be the best looking, or they don't have to be the most educated. They just have to have an authenticity about them that you feel like they have an honesty, and therefore integrity, and that you can believe them. So, I mean, if someone's trying to upsell a bottle of wine, for example, well, usually the upselling includes, a description of the wine and why that particular wine is a good choice. Well, that's sales, really. So again, that person who's doing that will be far more believable if they have an authenticity to their sales approach.
Well, I want to thank Steve for joining us today for In the Champions Corner. Stay tuned. You're going to have round 9 coming up shortly. Should be released in about another 2 weeks. Take care. Bye now.
That's it for this round of the Champions Corner. If you're serious about leveling up, head over to markkellymclean.com and join my free VIP club. You'll get access to knockout sales strategies in every new podcast episode. While you're there, sign up for my sales training program or book me to lead a seminar for your team. I'm Mark Kelly McLean. Stay sharp, stay hungry, and I'll see you in the next episode.